All right, in case you forgot, we're in Revelation 18. That's where we are.
It's been so long.
It's been a while. It's been a month almost. But what we see is really the continuation of the fall of Babylon the Great. And what we're going to see tonight is 3 laments. Now, what a lament is a crying out in mourning. Usually think of a lament at a time of a funeral or, the death of somebody that well known that people come together and lament over. We actually have a book of laments in the Bible called Lamentations, from some laments from the prophet Jeremiah. But here we see it's not God's people doing the lamenting here. It's the people that's left on earth, the people of the world. And we're going to look at 3 specific groups. One group is called the kings, the rulers, if you will, that are ruling on earth, the merchants, and the mariners, the people that are around the sea. And why are they grieving? Why are they lamenting? They're lamenting because Babylon's fall also brings disaster for them. So they're associated together. Even though they try to distance themselves from Babylon, it's too late. It's too late by then. All they can do is grieve. And they don't grieve because they're genuinely concerned. They're not grieving because they want to repent. They're grieving because they lost their livelihood. They lost their possessions. They lost their economic security. And the whole background to what we see here is Ezekiel 27. Ezekiel 27. And we're not going to read that because it's a very, very long chapter in a context of even longer chapters in the book of Ezekiel. But it's all about the fall of Babylon, the lamenting over Babylon. And John is using what he sees over Tyre, lamenting over the city of Tyre on the coast, and applying some of the same language to the great city Babylon. Now, when we say Babylon, and when we say Babylon the Great and the city, understand that that's a symbol representing the world system. That's a symbol representing the world powers that be, okay? And they're economic, they're religious, they're political, they're military, all of that wrapped into one. All right, so one thing we see from this, and something we all know, is that evil has consequences. And the people that are involved in evil usually find out too late before they're able to do something about it. But they're not without excuse. It's just that they waited too long. And so we're going to pick up in verses 9 and 10. It says, "The kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. They will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, 'Alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city, Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come.'" Very swift, and they're grieving. Now, as I said, these quote-unquote kings are a lot more like local rulers. King is used in a very, very general sense here. And these rulers benefit from Babylon the Great's prosperity. Because Babylon is prosperous, all these rulers are also prosperous. And they gain power by sharing in what the system was doing, right? What the worldly system was doing, or luxury. And as everywhere else we see in Revelation, where it talks about their adultery, understand that that's talking about a spiritual adultery. That's talking about an endorsement of idolatry and immorality, which was encouraged, it was fostered by this worldly system, Babylon, and it was experienced by many at the local level through sinful influences, through just practices that they had, whether it be personal or even cultural. It could be a personal sin, it could be a group activity that was evil, that people were participating in. And so, remember way back when we started Revelation, we were talking about the letters to the churches, and we talked about the trade guilds. Well, those are certainly involved here because the trade guilds were highly religious in nature, and they're very idolatrous in nature. So those are involved too, talking about their economic prosperity, and now Babylon has fallen. And this affects everybody still involved, right? So the kings here mourn because Babylon's destruction means that they have lost their cash cow. They've lost their substance. They've lost their source of income. And they're remorseful because they too will suffer financial ruin. Because Babylon has fallen, they all will fall. We all fall down, as the nursery rhyme goes, right? And so they try very hard to distance themselves from Babylon. Notice where they went. It says in verse 10, they will stand far off in fear of her torment. But will that rescue them from their fate? No. And what's amazing here is the timing, the sudden collapse of Babylon the Great. It is quick. It says within 1 hour. That's Revelation-ese for it's a very quick thing that happens, right? So Almighty God brings judgment on a mighty city very quickly and very succinctly. I mean, he just deals with it in an instant. All right, let's continue verses 11 through 14. And now we're talking about the merchants. The merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple cloth, silk, scarlet cloth, all kinds of scented wood, all kinds of articles of ivory, all kinds of articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots, and listen to this, and slaves, that is, human souls. Now, quite literally, it really says bodies, human souls. So that's how far their depravity is. They've made people as commodity. So the merchants weep because Babylon's fall means that they have lost their primary market. Now listen to what verse 14 says. The fruit for which your soul longed has gone from you, and all your delicacies and your splendors are lost to you, never to be found again. So they're finished. I mean, there's no hope for them anymore. These merchants have become rich from trading in the system, from Babylon, right? And now they're mourning because she can't buy their products anymore. Who's going to buy it? Not God's people. Not anybody involved any longer, because their destruction is tied up with the destruction of Babylon. And it's ironic retribution for those who worship the beast. Remember the reason they worship the beast? So that they could do what? Buy and sell. Now they can't buy and sell because they worship the beast. So John draws on Ezekiel's list of goods here, but he updates the language for the first century audience, and he gives us a whole list of things. You heard the list that I read out. It's a mouthful, but there's really 6 categories, and I'm going to break them down like this. The first category is precious stones and metals. Okay. The second category is expensive fabrics. Third category is costly woods and building materials, which we can relate to, right? It costs a fortune now. The fourth category is spices and perfumes. The fifth category is food. And the sixth category is animals and human slaves, or human souls. And so, given this list that we have here, Babylon was flamboyantly wealthy, right? Just looking at this list right here, they had all they thought they could possibly have and then some, right? Prosperous. But now that God has destroyed the great city, the people now observe that Babylon's desires and cravings, they're never going to be satisfied again. Who's going to buy from us? Babylon is destroyed. This world system is destroyed. They're gone forever, they say. It's finished. All All right, look at verses 15 through the first part of 17. And it continues with the merchants. The merchants of these wares who gained wealth from her will stand far off in fear of her torment. So very similar to the kings, same reason. And they are weeping and mourning aloud. And they're saying, alas, alas, for the great city that was clothed in fine linen, in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels, and with pearls. For in a single hour, all this wealth has been laid waste. In a single hour, all this wealth has been laid waste. That's why anybody wise will tell you that money cannot satisfy. It can be taken away just like that in an instant. The people of Babylon the Great find that out the hard way. Where it's not just money, it's everything. Everything is gone. What a fearful place to be in. But thanks be to God for Christ, we don't have to be in that place. And I'm thankful for that, and I know you are too. So following this list of goods and services, there's a funeral dirge. It continues here. And just like the kings, they stand at a distance and they weep and they mourn. And this is not because they are sorry for what they've done. They're weeping because of their self-preservation is kicking in. They're upset because, not because they're sympathetic with them, but they're observing this sudden and drastic downfall. It means their livelihood is over. Who's going to buy from them anymore? They suffer the same fate. Notice also that the city is personified as a wealthy woman adorned with all these precious jewels, right? Expensive fabrics. And the one who uses her wealth idolatrously, and she also plays the harlot. She's a prostitute. In other words, she's casting her wares about for anybody that she can entrap, anybody that she can enslave. And ironically, just like we saw with the kings, the heavenly Jerusalem will also feature gems and gold and all these expensive items in the new city of Jerusalem. Who has Revelation 21, verses 18 through 21? All right.
Now, some of these words I can't say.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm going to stop.
I can't say them either.
Okay, the construction of its walls was of jasper, and the city was pure gold like clear glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with all kinds of precious stones. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third chalcedony, the fourth emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth sardius, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. The 12 gates were 12 pearls. Each individual gate was of 1 pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass.
All right. So where in the great city of Babylon, all these items are worshipped, and they're, look how great we are. But in the new heavenly city of Jerusalem, they're building blocks. They're not worshipped. They're not glorified in. Nor are they the center of people's lives anymore. They're just pavement. They're just parts of the building, right? So the merchants lament her rapid ruin, just like the kings did. And it's especially shocking for a city that was so wealthy. They had everything, and they had everything abundantly, and yet the destruction was quick. That's shocking to them. And in 1 hour, it says, she is made desolate. All right, let's pick up verse 17, the second part, through verse 18. For in a single hour, all the shipmasters and seafaring men, sailors, and all whose trade is on the sea, stood far off and cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning. What city was like the great city? All right, so here we have the mariners, the sea people, right? Those who benefited from sea trade with Babylon. So what kind of people does this include? Because it's very complex. Once you start thinking about how complex all this is tied together, it affects everybody. You know, you have the ship captains, the pilots, you know, that steer the ship. You have the sailors themselves. You have the merchants that's buying and trading. You have all these, the shipbuilders. You have the fishermen that's involved. It's a huge thing, right? But then you have the passengers too, that's going from place to place. Everybody's affected by this. And so now this group of what I call mariners are reacting just like the kings and just like the merchants by standing way off and crying out. And here we see also that they threw dust on their heads, which is a traditional way of showing lament or mourning. You know, it's an extreme way of showing I'm sorrowful over this. But again, they're not sorry because they were doing evil things. They're sorry because their livelihood has come to a crashing halt. All right? So, any questions on those verses that we covered tonight in Revelation? We're not done. We've got a few more things to look at here.
Babylon burned to the ground.
Completely destroyed. Yep. Which is representative of the world system. You know, it's all going to come crashing down.
We just don't want to be here.
We don't want to be here.
Don't mean they do.
Whatever the case, God's got us. He's going to take care of us.
Very good hands.
All right, so the Bible, as you know, because y'all have been reading the Bible and studying the Bible for a long time, has a lot to say about money. It has a lot to say about wealth, and it has a lot of warnings that come with that. The dangers of loving money, for example, the dangers of putting your trust in money rather than trusting in God. And there's some scriptures I would like for us to read. Some of these are a little bit lengthy, so if we'll just be patient and just bear with one another. But I think it's a good practice for Christians to read scripture out loud with one another. And so let's just take a moment and do that together. And we'll start with Deuteronomy 18, 11 through 20, and just listen to the words that are used here.
Okay. Or a charmer, or a medium, or a necromancer, or one who inquires of the dead. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord your God is driving them out before you. You shall be blameless before the Lord your God. For these nations which you are about to dispossess, listen to fortune tellers and to diviners. But as for you, the Lord your God has not allowed you to do these. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brothers. It is to him you shall listen, just as you desired to listen to the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly, when you said, let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, or see this great fire any more, lest I die. And the Lord said to me, they are right in what they have spoken. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And whoever will not listen to my words that he shall speak in my name, I myself will require it of him. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name that I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that same prophet shall die.
Okay.
I think I read one.
So at first glance, it seems a little bit weird passage in what we're talking about. But think about it. Think about what is the motive for divination or fortune telling or interpretations or sorcery? What is the motivation? Income, right?
Yeah.
Somebody's gaining from a false practice. Somebody's gaining from it. And so God warns them through Moses. He warns the people, there's going to be people like this that are going to try to draw you astray. They're going to try to entrap you. They're going to try to get you to trust in them rather than trusting in God where their trust should be. And so he goes all through there and it warns them what a real prophet is and what a false prophet is. Don't trust in the false prophet. Trust in the one God has given, right? So at first glance, you're like, what in the world does that have to do with what we're talking about? It has everything to do with it. Because the base motive is gain for something that's not real. Does that make sense? All right. That's just one example there. In Deuteronomy, there, like I said, there's a lot more in Deuteronomy that we could have talked about. It talks about trusting God in a number of words. Right? And I think you did great reading that. All right, Psalm 52.
Excuse me. Why do you boast of evil, you mighty man? Why do you boast all day long, you who are a disgrace in the eyes of God? Your tongue plots destruction. It is like a sharpened razor, you who practice deceit. You love evil rather than good, falsehood rather than speaking the truth. You love every harmful word, O you deceitful tongue. Surely God will bring you down to everlasting ruin. He will snatch you up and tear you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. The righteous will see and fear. They will laugh at him, saying, Here now is the man who did not make God his stronghold, but trusted in his great wealth and grew strong by destroying others. But I am like an olive tree, flourishing in the house of God. I trust in God's unfailing love forever and ever. I will praise you forever for what you have done. In your name I will hope, for your name is good. I will praise you in the presence of your saints.
Okay, so you have Psalm 52, which is really a reflection back on Psalm 1, where you have this contrast between the godly and the ungodly, the righteous and the unrighteous. The godly trust in God, right? That's where the roots are. The roots go down deep and we're nourished because we trust in God. Here's saying, here's somebody that trusted in riches, and what did it get them? Nothing. In the end, destruction. So the lesson there is trusting God no matter what. No matter what you have, no matter how little, how much, trust God rather than things. All right, Psalm 62, 5 through 10.
My soul, wait thou only upon God, for my expectation is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense, I shall not be moved. In God is my salvation and my glory. The rock of my strength and my refuge is in God. Trust in him at all times. Ye people, pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us. Selah. Surely men of low degree are vanity, and men of high degree are a lie. To be laid in the balance, they are altogether lighter than vanity. Trust not in oppression, and become not vain in robbery. If riches increase, set not your heart upon them.
So pretty stern warning there from the psalmist. Don't trust in the riches, don't trust in even poverty. Trust in God. That's where the secret lies. And then 1 Timothy 6 through 10.
But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs.
It's one of the secrets of life. Godliness and being content leads to great gain. That's something that the world will look at and say, that's stupid. That's ridiculous. That's foolish. But those of us who know better, because we know God, the one who wrote it, we say it's wisdom. It's absolute wisdom for life. Godliness with contentment leads to great gain. It's something money can't buy. And of course, he gives the examples there of people who have ruined their lives because they went after the wrong thing rather than God. All right, so we have all these warnings, we have all these teachings about money and trust when it comes to that, but Jesus also emphasized those things too, about those who misplace their hope, and they'll be deeply disappointed if they do. So Matthew 6:19 through 20.
Do not lay up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor dust destroys, and where thieves do not break in or steal.
So what happens to earthly possessions? They either fade away, they spoil, they rot, they're stolen. Somebody else uses it. You can't take it with you. You might as well use your possessions for good, help other people, and just go on about your business with God. Because if we try to treasure these things up, and the very next verse, if she would have continued, says, where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. So where's your treasure? Where's your heart? That's a very good check for us. And so we must choose. Matthew 6:24.
No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money.
Okay, and who said that? Jesus. Jesus said that. Okay, you can't serve God and serve money. You have to choose. What Jesus said, you better choose wisely, because it affects everything else you do and everything else that you are. So the stewardship of money, the stewardship of our possessions is significant, right? It's a significant part of our walk with Christ. It's not something we can just take and separate and say, well, that's just part of secular life. That's just part of my business life, or that's just, over here. That's not associated with church or Christianity or anything. It's completely involved. It's right there. Jesus emphasized it over and over and over again. And so Paul does the same thing in 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19.
As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasures for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life.
All right, so how do we store up treasures for the future? What do we do?
What we do for God.
What we do for God. Only what we do for God is what's really going to last. Everything else is just wood, hay, and stubble. And so he gives us some clear teachings there about how we're to live our lives, and where's our hope supposed to be?
In Him.
In Him. That's exactly right. And not in anything else. Even though it is constantly a temptation for all of us to hope in other things or trust other things, we have to keep going back to God. So, couple more things. God considers not only what people do, it's not just the ones who are directly involved in the action, but also those who condone or those who are invested in some way or benefit from or even just cooperate with. Because if you look at Babylon the Great, it involved every single bit of that, all wrapped into one. It wasn't just the ones doing the evil deed themselves. It was the ones participating in from a distance, or condoning, or saying, oh, that's okay. That's all right. And so this issue is very complex, right? How do you choose? How do you choose what you're going to give your time or your attention or your money to? How do you choose that when the system that we live in is so complex? I mean, name one company that you can go and you can know for sure that it's not doing something evil with your money.
First Baptist.
We hope, right?
Yes, we definitely.
That's our trust. That's our aim, is that we glorify God with what we do. But we're not a business, right? We just want to serve Him and serve the kingdom. But this is so complex. Even ones who And some of you have learned this, companies who look good on the outside, but once you start digging into what they're actually doing with the money, not so good. So that's just a thought, because it affects all of us and how we make decisions. Second thing I wanted to ask you is, do you prefer funerals or do you prefer worship services? Worship services. I know in our funerals we can also worship too. But here's my point. The people of Babylon were worshiping, right? They were having the greatest worship service ever, but they were worshiping the wrong thing. They were idolaters. And what did it lead them to? Destruction. And it led them to the biggest funeral ever, right? But if we worship God now, what's going to happen? We get to worship God forever.
That's right.
And that's something, and it gets better and better as we go. And that's something to really look forward to. And so I kind of tongue-in-cheek ask you, do you prefer funerals or do you prefer worship services? In the end, it does make a difference how we live our life now. It makes all the difference. And then human beings should never be reduced to just mere commodities. And we can point at one example and say, well, humans should never be slaves, right? But that is so much more complex than just that, right? I mean, think about the entertainment industry itself. How people are used, whether, you could say, whether it's, sex sells, right? Or it's entertainment as far as the movies go. People are valued based on what kind of performance they can give. How about athletes?
Same.
They don't care about what kind of person they are, as long as they can perform, right? And they make them money.
They make fun of the ones that aren't.
That's right. That's right. And so, like I said, this is not a simple issue. It's a complex issue that affects everybody. So why do I bring it up? It's because we have such a big warning from Revelation 18 that tells us we better be concerned about these things because it affects our future. It affects our present. All right, any questions? Anything you want to add to that?